As a geologist, I spend a lot of time alone in the woods. And I'm walking along and the sunlight's glinting through the trees and blue jays are chasing each other through the underbrush and a crow is calling off in the distance. And it's very peaceful. And my mind just kind of empties out, my heart rate slows. I do the geology part, but everything else just gets very calm. And it's like a form of moving meditation or walking meditation. And I do this for hours a day. I'm very fortunate. I also feel very safe in the woods because I'm far away from the most dangerous species there is. And a lot of the members of that species are sitting in this room. You know what I mean. So the woods are usually very serene, except when they're not. And one Saturday morning, years ago, I was working up in central New Hampshire in the Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest. And this is a famous place in ecological circles because it's where the effects of acid rain were first documented on trees. Well, despite all the ecological studies, the rocks had been neglected and I was there to fix that. So the forest runs east-west. It's a beautiful forested valley, and the stream runs from west to east down the valley. And I was up on the north ridge, hiking along, doing the rocks, and then I came down one of the tributaries to the stream itself. I was hiking down the valley, down to the main creek, Hubbard Brook, and I spotted a nice flat rock, a nice flat outcrop right in the middle of the creek. I thought that'd be a good lunch spot. So I hopped across some stones and got on that rock, and I made my measurements that I always make, and then I just sat there and had lunch and admired the day. Now, it was a very warm, humid, overcast day. It was very still out, except for a slight breeze blowing down the valley from the west. So I'm sitting there enjoying my lunch, and all of a sudden there's this crashing noise coming from the direction of the tributary I had just hiked down. And out into the open comes a yearling moose. Now, yearling moose are about a year old. They're not full grown yet, but they're almost as tall as a regular moose, and they look kind of gangly. They have very long legs relative to the body. This moose was running down the hill, running down that tributary at full speed, ran across upstream about 20 feet from me, and then headed up the main creek and disappeared around the corner. Well, before I had time to even think, really, what does this mean? Another crashing noise came, and here came a black bear down the same tributary, which I'd been up 10 minutes before, in hot pursuit of the moose. He also came down and disappeared around the corner upstream, out of sight, and then this most god-awful cacophony ensued, this sound that seemed as loud enough to shake the forest itself. Obviously, the bear had caught the moose. So I hurriedly packed up my stuff, waded over to the south side of the creek, and then thought, what do I do now? The naturalist part of me, which is very curious, really had to see what the source of the noise was. However, that meant I was going to get closer to a bear that might be very protective about its prey. I decided it was worth the risk. So I snuck up through the trees towards the noise, and I came around the bend and I saw this astonishing sight. Full-grown black bear with, in its jaws, a nearly full-grown moose. The bear had its jaws on the back of the neck of the moose and was shaking the moose, trying to break its neck. As it was doing this, the most heart-wrenching moan came from the moose. Every time the bear shook, the moose would utter the sound that I can still hear to this day. And it was a sound of prey being killed by its predator, and a sound I've never heard before, and I've never heard it since. The bear's slobber was running down the neck. I was close enough. I was about 40 feet away, maybe, enough to see quite a bit of detail. So I watched in fascination, and I was also totally shocked because I had no idea bear went after moose, especially animals that, the squirrel, the chipmunk, their nuts and berries, Yogi Bear kind of food. a full-grown moose, nearly full-grown moose. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But I'd say I was about 40 feet away, trying to hide behind a tree that wasn't quite wide enough to hide me. But two things were in my favor. One, the bear had very weak eyesight, so couldn't see me, and I was downwind. That slight breeze was blowing from the bear towards me. The bear didn't see me. I decided to get out my camera. Well, this was before digital days, so all cameras had that nice, retro snap shutter sound. And I got it out and realized that the sound of the shutter might tip off my location. Remember, I didn't know what the bear's reaction was going to be. Would it run away or would it charge me to defend its prey that it obviously was working on very hard? So the bear kept up for about 5 or 10 minutes, and the moose slowly grew silent and limp. And then the bear started dragging the moose over to the north side of the creek and up onto a stream bank. Well, the stream bank was about 3 feet high, and trying to lug this 200-pound animal up onto the bank was a very hard task, and the bear was grunting with the effort. Finally, it stopped. Remember, I said it was a warm, humid day, and it just sat there and panted. Then decided to go for a dip. It ambled back to the creek, sat down on its paws, its forepaws sticking out, sat down on its belly in the middle of the creek and lapped up the water just like a dog would do. And it sat there for about a minute or two, and then all of a sudden the moose tried to get up again. Its job wasn't done. The bear hurried back to the moose, continued the morbid task of trying to break its neck. And again, the moose grew limp, and this went on for another 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden, the bear stood up, sniffed the wind, and ambled off. The bear had finally caught my scent, and fortunately, decided to do the flight thing rather than the fight thing. Well, adrenaline was racing through my veins, I can tell you. So I got off and I hurried back to my car, which was on the south side of the creek, parked on a road, as fast as I could, and very shakily drove home. I had to, of course, tell my roommate what had just happened. I was sharing a house with another colleague, and of course, he was suitably astonished. The next day was Sunday, which is normally our day off. We sit around in the cabin and rest and watch TV. He was kind of turning me on to NASCAR at that point. What a waste of a beautiful Sunday in New Hampshire, but never mind. Anyways, we weren't going to do NASCAR that day. We were going to go back to the scene of the crime. We had to see what happened. So we parked the car where I parked it the day before, snuck through the woods commando style, ears perked, eyes darting around, attuned for the slightest noise. We finally got to the place where the attack had occurred earlier, peered over some bushes and saw nothing. Nothing. No bear, no moose, no nothing. We crept up to the spot, and wouldn't you know it, it was our weakest sense organ. Anyone know what that is? This thing that tipped off that something had happened there, very traumatic. It was the most powerful musk smell I've ever smelled, and it was everywhere. It was all over the place. We looked around. There was no blood. There was no fur. Maybe a stone turned over. Couldn't see a thing. The smell was everywhere. It's the smell you would imagine a bear would exude after doing all this, hard work on a warm afternoon. And in fact, it smelled like a locker room of bears, if you ask me. So what had happened? Had the bear come back and gotten the moose and finally succeed in dragging it off and maybe burying it and so on? Or had the moose, unbelievably rallied and got up and gone off and actually lived? Well, we certainly were not going to find out. The forest keeps its secrets, and it kept that one for sure. But, what was the lesson from this? Well, yeah, I continued in Hubbard Brook. I wasn't scared or anything, even though there was this, rapacious black bear around. I just kept doing my work the rest of that summer. There wasn't much left. This was August already. But boy, it really made me appreciate the forces of nature that are at work out there and what goes on in the woods that you don't know about. If we'd come on that site a day later when the smell had dissipated, we wouldn't have had a clue that anything has happened. So the next time you go out and you're hiking through some nice calm forest, think about if the trees could talk where you're walking through, what amazing stories would they tell that you wouldn't have a clue? Thank you very much.